Thank you, Alexis, for being here. And I walked around the room briefly. So great to see some new faces. So thank you so much for joining us. With Alexis being such a prominent AI leader in this community, I hope you get to get a takeaway or two on how to apply AI to your jobs, or really just how to think about some of its applications to your operations. There's been quite a few AI developments, so we'll get into all of that. And it's not about robots taking over, as Alexis will explain. But as you'll hear, it's about this notion of human-machine teaming. So let's jump right in. You've had such a rich career in government technology at, as Mike mentioned, the Air Force Research Lab, government before that, in industry as well. What have you been up to?
What have I been up to? So I think one of the really interesting things is actually to acknowledge how long AI has been a part of our lives, and even, quite frankly, how amazing government and public service have been in the leadership of AI, much longer than I think sometimes we're given credit for. So to give a perspective of that, way back when I was in the UN, the US was actually leading some of the first conversations about AI. When I then joined USAID, was a chief innovation officer and helped set up a lot of our scientific work there. One of the most interesting things was that we had 22 AI projects at USAID more than a decade ago. And really doing some amazing work. And I think then, was lucky enough to join Google, specifically, during COVID. And if you think about it, what an amazing time, not just from a technological, dependency and requirement, but also really for us as people, as leaders, trying to figure out what place does this technology have in our lives, right? And really having to lean in. I remember specifically working, I think it was with the California Department of Motor Vehicles, on how do you give a 16-year-old a driver's license at a time when he can't come in and do a test, right? I mean, so there are all these really interesting challenges. I think then, being at DoD, really it was quite important for me to make sure that people actually could use a tool. I was really fascinated by how much time we were spending talking about AI or training people about AI, and then they didn't have anything they could actually use, right? Which didn't seem like the best approach. And I should say too, all of these opinions are my own, not OpenAI, things like that. But I really wanted to have a candid exchange and lessons learned. I think what was really exciting about being able to lean into putting a tool in people's hands was, most importantly, really a study of AI adoption. So what was it that made people want to use it? And I'll talk a little bit about what we found today, because I think it's still something that I kind of carry in my heart now that I'm in this role. And then finally, with OpenAI, as was mentioned, I'm getting to actually, for the very first time, take frontier model weights and install them directly on, in this case, Los Alamos supercomputer, Venado, specifically on very precious and amazing data that has never really breathed the air of the outside world for very good reasons, and really figuring out how much can we advance science and national security by bringing those types of things to bear. So it's been a wild ride, but hopefully you'll share a little bit more.
Very exciting times, especially learning how much time has passed since some of those developments. But I was talking to someone earlier, not a lot has changed, actually. So I'm sure we'll get into that. So there's been a number, speaking of new, I guess now, there's been a number of new developments recently. I'm sure many people in this room know about the executive orders, the AI action plan, some new things going on with GSA. So what are you excited about in that context?
So I am excited about a number of things. I think one of the first ones really is this concept, for me, of human-machine teaming. I actually think one of the things that's happening right now is we're talking too much about the machine, too much about AI, and not actually recognizing that, nothing happens unless there is a person, right? My fingers are connected to my heart and to my head, and I am ultimately using this tool to curate, the kind of place and impact that I want to have. And so I think there's such opportunity as we think about not just AI literacy, but when we think about human potential, how is it that we're intentional about, how we show up? So I think this recognition that, human machine teaming is really exciting. Quite frankly, at a very recovering bureaucrat way, I was really excited by, what CDAO did on the mechanisms with frontier companies like us. One of the things they did is just take away the procurement paperwork pain, right? And sometimes getting amazing things done in government is, comes down or it might die on the vine just in figuring out the paperwork, right? So I actually think it's really important to call out where you have acquisition or procurement innovation and what that does to just make it easier for everyone else to lean in. So a huge shout out, to kind of them. I'm certainly excited. Last week, we put out our first open weights model. And I think what's really important about that is open source, open weights, but really the idea of being able to bring this technology home, right? And open weights was specifically what I had used at DoD before. And that just gives a real chance to be playing in the space that, you don't necessarily have in other capacities. Of course, probably the thing that made the most news was the fact of our kind of commitment to bring, our newest ChatGPT 5 to any government agency really that wants it for $1. We couldn't do free because I think you have to do $1. But for me, I think why so many of us are excited about that is, quite frankly, public servants are awesome. It's amazing, right, to be in public service. And it's just not appropriate for someone to have better technology in their personal life than they do in the important, incredible missions that we serve. And so I think it was just really important for us to say, how can we get any barrier, away from that, and how can we kind of show that we believe and supercharge, in our small way, how a public servant, a public leader gets to show up. I would say the other thing, there's just things, of course, with ChatGPT 5, being able to have model optimizer and other types of elements. But I think more than anything, at a really, really human level, there is an opportunity right now to say, who do I want to be? And what does this technology allow in the pursuit of my potential? And that can be in your personal life, in your professional life, but really that I think is a really important question and is one that, we're seeing a lot of people go on different journeys around.
Lots of things there that you touched on, and I like what you said about supercharging, because I feel like for a long time it has been kind of stagnant, or there's been a lot of roadblocks, and now it feels like we're really at that supercharged time to kind of just harness that and just run with it. What stands out to you about how government is approaching AI now?
So I think a few elements I would highlight. So I think the first is, I think the agencies that are quite advanced or really looking at the most critical uses of AI recognize that this is not a commodity. This is not like cloud, not all AI is equal, and really thinking about what you want and what you're trying to do. So I really, caution and I applaud those groups that understand this is not a commodity product. It's something that changes in some cases every week, every quarter, every launch. And so really being intentional about that. I think another one is maybe I'll share a few frameworks that I found really worked. So the first thing that I think is really important to understand about AI, and as a CIO, this was something that I struggled with initially, but I think have come to become really excited about. If you think about it, every technology up until this point is a technology that in essence, kind of rolled out universally, right? It was kind of like we as workers and humans kind of had to subjugate ourselves to the machine, right? It worked this way and I could drop down this and I got this response and everyone got the same thing. And I think what excites me about AI is the fact that this is the first truly intimate technology that has ever really existed. Meaning that, Amy, what you're good at, your incredible expertise and experience, you are going to query, right? Or have a different relationship with knowledge than I am. And you're going to get to show up in your terms, right? It's not going to be like, Amy, first you must do X, then you do Y. It's really, you can just bring your, all of that expertise, all that experience, and you can have a relationship with knowledge at a level of intimacy to your role, to your place, to your mission that has never existed before. And I think as CIOs, we often think about, well, kind of, this is the technology that I will give, my teams, and this is what we're rolling out. And I think a big lesson learned for me as we got to roll out an AI system and had the great honor of actually seeing how people were using it, the level of entrepreneurialism, right? Entrepreneurialism, the amount of things that people could solve by me just getting out of the way. And I'll give you a tangible example. When I first came in, there was about 183 different tools, systems, platforms that, teams across my organization felt like, I really need this right away to do the mission. When we rolled out AI, and then especially when we help people understand how to use RAG, and I'll explain what that is for those that might not know. When people started being good at using RAG, the list of 183 tools that they needed went down to 47. I want that to sink in for a minute. All of those people solved their own problem. They didn't need me to do it. And if you think about it, a lot of times when we design solutions, we design them for, kind of the senior leaders or the outputs. We don't necessarily always create technology where at that information originator, right? At that very human level. And everyone here, the information that matters. So when I say RAG and why I think it's so powerful, and this is one of the things where I think that oftentimes we'll get so excited about the next thing, which is amazing. So for example, agentics, but we actually haven't leveraged, some of the stuff that's already there. So for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with the term RAG, in essence what that means, and I'm oversimplifying it, but if you go right now into a tool like ChatGPT and you ask a question, it will do its best to go across all the information it has, and it's kind of curated and collected and give you like a good, fast answer. But what RAG is the ability to say, what, I actually know the information I want to have a relationship with. Maybe it is in, the upload of 12 of my last, 12 years of annual reports. Maybe it's in the project management data. Maybe it is in a PDF of my research or some compilation of that. And what RAG lets you do is to say, I'm going to use all the power of that kind of curiosity curation machine against the information that I think is valid. So think about that. Instantly, for example, if I worked on the F-35, I could say, I want to find out this in the manual. I want to find out that. I want to be able to harmonize my data. And no one had to come to me as the CIO to ask me to do that. I didn't have to amend a contract. I didn't have to go and tweak code. They were able to simply say, in my role and my capacity, this is my universe of knowledge, and now they're able to have a relationship with it in a different way. And I emphasize that, Amy, because so much of human-machine teaming is gonna be about like how we show up. Like, what is my ambition, right? As a leader of, let's say, a critical mission area in government. I now have, this incredible knowledge base, both external as well as internal, in my fingertips. And the question is, how do I navigate a relationship with that? And how do I exercise the curiosity that lets me discover things that I didn't discover before?
So many things there that I think resonates with a lot of folks in this room, even beyond tech, is how you show up, the art of the possible, really, with how you would choose to leverage AI, and then also the power of curiosity. I love, how putting that into perspective in that way. There are still some misconceptions, lots of rumors and things out there about AI. Like I mentioned, it's not the robots taking over. What are some of the ones that stand out to you that you can help dispel for folks in this room?
Sure. So I think one of the elements that maybe isn't about AI, but AI is a manifestation of it. So if we all put our kind of hats on as, government leaders or contributors, I think one of the things that's really interesting when it comes to technology is that we often think, well, we just have to tell people to do this. Just do this differently, like use this system, do this thing. What I would highlight, I think, particularly about emerging technologies and things like AI, is that doing is not enough. Like, people actually have to change how they feel and how they think. And where I think that comes into play is that, like, the narrative that we give people, and one of the ways that I've been trying to contribute to what I think in some levels might have been a broken narrative, is for a long time we've said things to people like, it's really complicated, AI is really hard, like only the smartest kids can do it, oh, you need a data scientist. And in essence, what we were really doing is telling people you're not smart enough. The second thing that we did is we over-index. I think responsibility and safety is important, but we kept telling people, what about morality? What about accountability? What about responsibility? And honestly, as a public servant, I found that a little bit offensive, because I'm already expected to show up as an intentional, a moral, a responsible leader every day, whether or not AI existed, right? And so what in essence we're doing, we're telling people that you're not moral enough. And, I remember very specifically sitting across from someone in a uniform, and in fact, I'm not gonna call you out, sir, but I just did. So we have someone in a uniform back there. And what I think is amazing is, the day he chose to put on that uniform, he signed up, and thank you for that, to potentially make the hardest moral decisions on earth anyone might have to make, right? And so how dare we kind of say, but you're not moral enough for this technology. I trust you with a clearance. I trust you with the $100 million cockpit. I trust you with these things, but I don't trust you with ChatGPT. Like, that's not okay, right? And so I think a big part of this is actually realizing, like, you're enough. Like, we're all smart enough. We've all adapted to every technology up to this point. You're already moral enough. Like, that's what we hope, right, is already embedded in our public servants. So I do think this idea of helping people understand, like, in the feeling standpoint is, they do amazing things if you actually believe in them, let them have access to the tools. And so I think the first one is really being careful about the narrative of what we're telling people. Because when we tell people, like, you can do this, they do amazing things. And they don't necessarily need special degrees, right? In fact, I was sharing that some of our most, and I'm gonna draw on my research before OpenAI, but some of the people we saw be most talented at going from being basic level queryers to advanced level queryers were moms. Because moms, are used to saying things like, let me ask that question in a different way, right? Or we're used to maybe not believing everything we get the first time. But most importantly, what we found is that the mentality of, moms was often benevolent. Meaning they would go, and if the AI didn't get something right, they'd say, oh, you tried, but actually I need you to do this, or tweak it this way. And what's interesting about that mentality is that, like, in essence, she was teaching herself, and the machine at the same time. And so the ability to be an advanced querier is actually really locked into almost our attitude and our mind state. I would say the second one, from a logic point of view, is really understanding that this is something that's going to change all the time. I have to know, sitting up here with you, Amy, today, that I could be 100% wrong in 6 months, and that's okay, right? Because this stuff is changing. Like, it is okay to kind of do the best, to lean in. And the final one I would say is that if we think about a framework, if we think about like what this typically looks like, I'm going to give it to you in like Alexis terms, and I always like everything super simple. So the first stage is people need their ta-da, right? Meaning like they actually have to try it, use it, explore it to understand kind of what the art of the possible is. And one of the things I found, and again, my past life, is that if you actually have someone start and use the tool in play or in personal kind of elements, sometimes they'll often take it up much faster than if you introduce it professionally, because it kind of lowers, the risk feeling and the vibes. But then you have a stage, which is kind of like, uh-oh, meaning, all right, now that I'm using it, like, how do I use it right? How do I use it well? But my hypothesis is that what we were doing before is we were putting the uh-oh before the ta-da. And what happens is when you put the uh-oh first, and someone doesn't actually have experience with AI, all they can do is regurgitate everyone else's fears, right? And so actually giving them a tool, letting them have the ta-da, actually means that when they ask the, how do I use this well and right, it's a better conversation, right? The third is like what I call the aha stage, because all of a sudden, and hopefully many of you have already had this, you find that thing where it's like, oh, wait a minute, you mean I don't have to do that anymore? You mean I can do that in 30 seconds? Like, this is amazing, right? And that's the best, right? And there's so many different ahas that I think government is finding. But what's also interesting about the aha stage is that people will tend to also very quickly feel shame and guilt, because they'll feel like I'm cheating, right? I'm cheating. This is just too easy. Like, where's my value? And so actually when we do, kind of AI training, really telling someone like, it's not cheating. You're optimizing. We actually want you to bring the most efficient you to work, but actually telling someone you're going to feel this way and it's okay. That's actually a sign that you're advancing, right? That you are using it in a way that's useful. But again, it's calling out the fact that people are on a human journey, right? As much as they're on a technology journey. And the last one, I kind of call like ho-hum. And it may sound weird, but at the Air Force Research Lab, one of my biggest goals around AI was to figure out how quickly we could take someone from being afraid of AI to being bored. Now, bored is a weird goal, right? Why bored? Because if someone is bored, what happens is, or if they came to me and said, this tool doesn't do this or doesn't do that, how amazing, because they just entered a tech pull mentality instead of a tech push, right? And if we want to keep up, if we want to kind of, dominate, as a country, have adversarial advantage, we actually need people in a mindset to say, what's next? It can't do this, help me do this, right? If we can put our government, our national security in the driving what's next, demanding what's next, instead of feeling like technology is being pushed upon them, there's no stopping our potential, right, as a company, and as a country and a company and all of those things. But I really think it matters that when you get to the stage of like boredom or dissatisfaction. So I like to use the example, I was at Google before, of like, if you met someone and they had never Googled it, you'd be like, what do you mean? Like, everyone's done that, right? And I think this idea of like, this is, AI is really just the next generation of a relationship with knowledge. And so I think, really kind of saying, if you find yourself getting to I'm bored, it can't do this, it can't do that, you are an advanced user, right? And you are ready to take on agentics, to take on RAG, to take on the next thing. But we have to inspire our people that they actually have this potential, that they can, master this and get them to that place of real demand and tech pull. And then we will just, as a people, be unstoppable.
This is starting to sound like a motivational speech for everyone. This is great. I think it sounds like we need to maybe make ChatGPT a verb now, the next Google. So in the next 3 to 5 years, what's one, I know you talked a lot about some of the capabilities, and RAG was one of them. What is one breakthrough or something that you think will be most transformative in government over the next 3 to 5 years?
So I think I'm going to call out two things. I think the first is one of the big differences is over the last couple months, reasoning models emerged. And I think reasoning models are really important for government and really as humans for our relationship with knowledge. And what I mean by that is when you used, let's say, a ChatGPT 4 or things like that, the goal in our case was to kind of get you the best information as quickly as possible. Reasoning models are much more geared to take the benefit of like thinking, stopping, thinking, reasoning. But what I liked most about them, and this is just my own personal bias, is actually reasoning models tell you what they're going to do, how they're going to do it. And so for me, in my previous public service capacity, I wanted to be able to say, how do I know where it got this answer from? Like, how do I know what it's doing to give me this answer? And if you've never used like any of the reasoning models, for us that would be O3, and now it's kind of wrapped into ChatGPT 5. You actually get to see it go on a knowledge journey, and you can correct it. You can be like, actually, I don't want sources like that, or I want you to do this. And just this ability, again, to kind of team, with this technology and to say like, hey, like, and to redirect it and to be engaged with it on the fly. But most importantly, to understand where it's getting, the information or why it's drawing a conclusion is super fascinating and just really helpful and gives, I know, me more confidence. The other one, though, and this is not, again, this isn't maybe Alexis' way of saying it, not at all the corporate way of saying it, but like, I get to have minions now, right? So this idea of agents, or the idea of AI being able to do things kind of specifically for you, it's almost like having, in one way, shape, or form, everyone gets to become a manager, right? And the question is like, whether it's, kind of treating AI like an assistant, or whether it's kind of a different knowledge base, right? Or an extension of kind of my team. Like, I have so many people who, in essence, now set as an example. They give, like, the AI homework for the night. Like, they'll say, okay, like, while I'm gone, I want you to, like, compile, these 3 different pieces of information and evaluate this. And then they come back in the morning and they're like, oh, and I just... There are things like that are just transformational, right? But really, this comes down to, I think, in that idea of human-machine teaming, is like, we kind of have to want to show up that way, right? I have to want to kind of figure out, like, where else can my job go? Can my role do? Like, I have this extension. And, I think this idea of just how do you enable all of your potential, and yet you don't necessarily have to be the one, right, doing every single thing. I think this is going to be really exciting over the next year or two. And quite frankly, I'm constantly impressed every day with someone coming to me and telling me, whether it's in their personal lives or their professional lives, about things they've done, to optimize that part of their existence. And I'll give a quick example. One of my friends works for ATF, but on the side, he grows hay and beef in Loudoun County. And he came and he said, oh yeah, I've got this whole, kind of GPT set up. It imports all the weather data, it does this and that, and like, it tells me exactly when to cut my hay. And like, how tightly, to do the bales based on the weather coming up. And I was just like, oh my gosh, number one, I didn't know you were a farmer. But number two, like, how amazing, right, that you're leaning in and kind of having this team that then helps you be the best farmer, right, you can be. And I think that's the idea of AI is not going to be good at everything. It shouldn't be used for everything. But for where you have clarity on who you want to be and the potential that you want to be able to fulfill in any of these categories of your life, I think it has the ability to support that or contribute to that in ways that we didn't even see 6 months ago.
Amazing. I know we have a few minutes left, so I don't want to hog too much of your time. Myself, I do want to turn it over to the audience. So if you do have a question, just raise your hand. We'll pass you a mic. And I will ask one more, but get yours ready, please. Oh, there's already one. I'll turn it to you first.
Hi, Audrey Vaughn, Medallia. Looking at, this is specific to ChatGPT 5 and just thinking about kind of what's next for how government can use similar or that technology. With GPT-5, the prompting and just the level of excellence in the model, it's really important to think about how to prompt. And I imagine for my government clients, when we think about scaling and taking action, it's really about taking action to improve kind of the end user and improve things. How do you scale whether it's discipline or creativity, particularly in the way that teams work? So there's the individual, but then really it's how collectively we work together and I'm sure the models are going to continue to change, but as there may be a little bit more advanced way of using AI, and how can we scale that type of mindset but still be creative? So.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a few things. I think there's practical things, and then there's ways of maybe thinking and working together. So one thing I will tell you that I do all the time is I will give the AI kind of context, like who I am, what I'm trying to do, what I'm trying to solve, and then I will tell it actually to come up with different prompts for me, right? So sometimes if you don't know exactly where to start, start with like, what are some great prompts for this? And you would be surprised how many times that actually gives you, and I usually tell it things like, give me 5 different prompts or other things, because what will happen is amongst those 5, maybe not any single one of them was what I wanted, but I start to see a blend of things, right? And then I'll kind of combine that. That's my human curator part, right? That's why the human part of human-machine teaming is so critical. But then I'll get to curate and say, you know what, here's the perfect prompt. And you can do things actually now where you can edit kind of within, we call Canvas and stuff like that. I think another one, when we think about RAG, is I think you're going to see individuals start to kind of curate their own little knowledge universes. But that also means that we don't work in vacuums, right? So you're going to start to see teams kind of have collections of hey, here's all the information on this program or something that we've curated together. I think you're going to see a lot about connectors. So being able to draw into information systems where appropriate. So as an example for me, I have mine connected to my Google Drive and my Gmail. And what that lets me do is when I'm thinking about something, which I probably already have in 6 different documents, right, or a bunch of different emails, it actually can draw on the totality of my thinking versus just having to redo that every time. Another element is project spaces. And so what that means is that when I have, in most of our roles, we have a few things that we're definitely on the hook for, right? They're pretty consistent parts of our job. And so when we have that, I actually create projects, and then that way, I stay within that theme, within that persona, kind of within that role very specifically, and lets me kind of use the consistency, right, of the mission, for example, in that. And then I would say one of the most interesting things is actually just sharing this with each other. So one of the elements we really tried to lean in on was around acquisition, kind of helping people in acquisitions understand how to use AI. And what was so fascinating is if you got, kind of a group of 10 acquisition professionals, and this is what's so great about the fact that the technology is individual, right, is people have different experiences, different expertise, and because of that, they do query differently. And so when you kind of have, say, okay, everyone go and solve this for an hour, and then they come back and then they compare, not only the outcomes, but they compare the prompts. In every single conversation I've ever been in, you'll end up having people be like, you can do that? You can ask that, right? And so that great way of being able to benefit from the power of team, from learning from each other. And so, I think there's so many different practical ways, but most of this is also starting with that mindset of I can do it. I can try it. You're not going to break the machine, right? It's not going to go, wrong. Try it. You're safe.
Hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Great. There's another one. We'll go over here first, or who was first? Right over here on the left. Or my left, sorry.
Thank you. As always, Alexis, great presentation. Quick question. Intelligence, any kind of ethical and moral standards go with intelligence. So we don't expect dogs and cats to be ethical and moral. Now that we are creating this synthetic intelligence, morality and ethics and governance are not meant for, do you agree, that they're not meant for human actors, not these men in uniform, but these are meant for these synthetic intelligence that we're creating, and we tell it, yes, you're intelligent, but don't discriminate against African Americans, don't send older population to different healthcare than you're doing, don't suggest to kill innocent civilians, so that ethics and morality is not meant for human actors, what industry is asking for, but meant for that synthetic machines. Do you agree with that?
I think part of that is going to ultimately come from, and it's also important, I think, sometimes we talk about AI as if it's like some one universal thing, right? And I think that's not at all the case. So some, to your point, some AI is going to be more more application of a prescriptive, right, or constrained kind of repetition when we want to think about automation or efficiencies or kind of machine learning. And so in that case, when we may be asking the machine to work with a certain amount of autonomy, then we've got to be really, really clear and really, really intentional about, what we're doing as the human on the loop or in the loop, right, changes position. But I would say specifically, generally around kind of large language model usage, I get to choose how I show up and like what my fingers do and what my mind asks and what I look for. Like this is a part of deciding like every day in small ways who I am. And I'll give you an example. So, oftentimes, maybe when you're just consuming social media, it will tend to reinforce maybe a thought or an assumption or, a bias or things like that you have because it wants to serve up what it thinks you want or know. When I show up to do a query, and let's say it's on a topic I don't know a lot about, I can choose to query, and maybe I do have a little bias. So I could be like, tell me all the reasons why this policy is wrong. Well, I've already shown up telling the machine that I want it to agree that this is wrong and to reaffirm my position. But I can also show up and say, hey, I don't know a lot about this. Give me the pros and cons. Give me, facts on both sides. Help me make a really balanced, kind of informative exploration. And I just think it's really important that we understand, like every day when we use any technology, but especially when we use AI, we make choices in how we show up. And I think what's really important is that we don't take that away, that we don't somehow assign that the AI does this or the AI does that. This is about how and who we want to be as people, like in using these types of tools. And so I'm really excited because I think as people realize more of what it can do and more of being able to query in those really intentional ways, I think we're seeing an ability to kind of have conversations and reflect and think about things, again, in ways that tools really didn't allow us to before. But ultimately, if you want to like show up as a good person, right? It sounds silly to say that, but like really, like I tell my kids, and I promise I'll stop babbling after this. I have 3 kids. One of them I drive to school and she starts her freshman year tomorrow. And we know that probably some of her teachers will let her use AI and some won't. And what I told her is, I was like, it doesn't matter. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, obviously I want you to know AI, but if you decide to show up as someone who looks for shortcuts, who looks to cheat, who doesn't value the opportunity to learn and to grow and the investment that we're making in you, you're going to do that whether it's with AI or anything else, right? If you're a person who looks at this and says, wow, like this is an opportunity to learn, this is an opportunity to grow, then you're going to show up in a way that makes sense regardless of what technology you are. And so I think, again, going back to that core root question of who do we want to be? How do we want to show up in this incredible age is going to be a lot about what we see at a community, individual, family, and national level.
So much good advice in there. Anything you would like to leave them with, any piece of advice?
I would just say if you're not using it yet, start using it. Like just try. It really is. I'll tell you that my favorite 2 things that I did. So if don't use it for work, that's fine. Do whatever. But my 2 favorite things. One is like I told my husband, who's maybe slightly autistic, like write me love letters. Like it's okay. Like I know you can't always find the words, but like I will know that when you give me this beautiful thing that you thought about me, right? That you cared about me. So like write me a love letter with ChatGPT. That is great. The second one that I did last week was actually took a picture of my fridge and said, I don't want to go to the store. Like this is what's in my fridge. Tell me how to make a meal in like 10 minutes with what I have. the more the more you just kind of experience a technology, the more it will find value in your life. And so I would just say, more than anything, don't be afraid. You're enough. You can do this. Just start.
Thank you so much. Great note to end on. Everyone, a round of applause for Alexis.